Hey art nerds! Today I want to share with you a couple of really simple techniques for coloring, adding shade, and adding dimension to your alcohol marker illustrations. This is particularly great if you've got a limited selection of alcohol markers at your disposal. Maybe you've got a 24 set or a 12 set that you've kind of augmented with some open stock markers. Either way, the techniques we're going to go over today are really going to help you add shading, dimension, and additional color to your illustrations. They can also be really great if you're struggling with shading your alcohol markers. If you find that you desaturate your pieces too much or you pick all the wrong shadow colors, these tips are going to be really helpful for that. So we're starting off with a couple of illustrations. We have a bust of Kara and then we have a bust of Tanner. Both of them are characters from my comic 7-inch Kara. And all I'm doing is I'm adding just kind of the very basics of color to them. And I'm using the white of the paper as one of the base colors. So we're using the white of the paper of the skin and we're kind of just focusing on adding shadow from there. I have a lot of tutorials here on this channel on ways you can use alcohol markers. I'm going to link some of those down in the description below. But I also have some great playlists that'll help you find more of what you're looking for, including how to select skin tones using Copic and how to create blending triads. So that's my system of selecting Copic colors so that you always get colors that work well together. I'm going to make sure I link those down in the description for you guys as well. I'm not really going to go over the colors that I use here since they're pretty common in my tutorials. I've talked about them a lot of times and you guys will be able to find that pretty easily. What I'd prefer to focus on is how I'm thinking about applying color. So for this tutorial, I'm going at this like I have a very limited amount of Copics. Now, if I were just starting my alcohol marker collection today, I would start with the Blick Studio brush markers. I really like those. I think they are great alcohol markers. You can get them very cheaply through Dick Blick. I'll put a link down in the description below. They have replaceable nibs and they are refillable, but they do have a smaller color range than Copic markers, which is why I say I would start with the Blicks. And then from Blick, I would add Copics and Prismacolor, so actually very similar to my alcohol marker collection. If you guys are looking for great alcohol markers, I review alcohol markers here on this channel, so I'll make sure I drop a link down in the description below. I highly recommend you watch some of those reviews before you commit to buying anything, and that way you can save some money and get some markers you really like. I also want to say that I am a big fan of the brush tip in markers. I know not everybody's a brush person. Some folks are bullet tip and some people are chisel tip, but I really like flexible brush nibs on my alcohol markers, and you guys can probably see I really rely on those flexible brush tips to apply color. So as I mentioned way earlier, I'm using the white of the page kind of as our basis color, and I'm trying not to add too many layers of shading. So for the skin, it's basically two colors, and I utilize the same color over and over again to build up tone. I've said in some of my other marker videos that you can get about 3 shades of tone from each marker just by layering them. And when you have a really limited selection of markers, that's a really important trick to know. I also used a really nice warm pink for our blush that I apply above our eyes, across our cheeks, under our nose, and under our lips, as well as the insides of the ears and underneath the chin. Then for the hair, I'm pretty much just going to do 2 layers of color, our highlight and then our low light, letting the white of the paper be our major highlight. For eyes, very similar, keeping it fairly simple. The only difference is I use a very cool light blue at the tops of the eyes to create a shadow. Now, when you have a limited selection of markers, it is important to make sure you do have a blender marker, because if you're using the white of the paper, you want to be able to blend out that transition, and B, have a few pastels, maybe a pastel pink, a pastel green, a pastel blue, and a pastel yellow, and that's going to help with blending as well. course, then I turn around, I prove myself wrong. I actually used 3 colors for Kara's hair, and honestly, I'm probably going to do the same for Tanner. So we have the white of the paper, we have the highlight, which you guys can see I blended away some of the white of the paper, and then we have our mid-tone color, then a shadow color, and that's helping to add contrast and delineation. And speaking of contrast and delineation, I have tutorials on using alcohol markers to create contrast and shadow. So that is a recommendation that you guys check those out. So that's Kara just about finished. I recorded this tutorial to help me prepare for one of my alcohol marker classes taught through the Nashville Plaza. I teach art classes through Plaza pretty regularly. You guys can find a list of my Nashville and St. Charles Parish, Louisiana area classes over on my blog in the sidebar at nattosoup.blogspot.com, or if you live in the Nashville area, you guys can sign up for my class mailing list. I'll have that down in the description below, and I'll send you guys an email whenever I have a class coming up. It's just to let you know about classes. If you're interested in just kind of learning about how I make art, I have a general mailing list that you guys might enjoy. And if you guys are interested in learning more about 7-inch Kara and hearing about the upcoming Kickstarter for Volume 2, I have a mailing list for that as well. Alright, so for the first method of shading, we're going to use color pencils. For today, I'm going to be using the Faber-Castell Polychromos color pencils, but honestly, this is a method that will work with any fairly decent color pencil, including Crayola color pencils. You really don't need anything fancy for that. And we're going to start with Tanner. And what we're using the color pencils for is to add some shading and to add some further nuance to the skin. So this can be really helpful if you're somebody who maybe wants to do more realistic art with alcohol markers. This is a good way to kind of get some softer colors, some softer transitions, rather than kind of having to have a bunch of alcohol markers at your disposal or having to be really, really good at blending. Using color pencils can help you kind of mitigate the shades. So I'm using a skin tone slightly darker than what I used in terms of markers, just to add some additional shadow to his skin underneath his bangs and around his face. Then I'm using kind of a yellow ochre color to start adding some shading and some definition to his hair. You can also use color pencils for your underdrawing. In fact, I used a Pilot Color Eno Pink Lead for the sketch. It's one of my lineless alcohol marker hacks, but you can do that with almost any lighter color pencil. Doesn't have to be specifically Color Eno. Now, you don't have to use color pencils just to add shading. You can also use them to add highlights. Color pencils are an opaque medium. And for this demonstration, I'm actually working on Canson XL watercolor paper, so it does have a little bit of tooth, which is great for color pencils and great for watercolor. And it's also fairly absorbent, which is going to make blending your markers a lot easier. I'm also using a little bit of brown just to kind of further refine his hair. Now we're switching over to watercolor, which is what I'm going to use for Kara. I'm using the Core Mini palette, which I love this palette, but you don't have to use expensive watercolors for this. You can use Praying watercolors or Yarko watercolors, basically any watercolors that you're comfortable with, and that layer fairly transparently will be good over alcohol markers. You want to avoid anything in general that's kind of opaque unless you're looking to build up opacity. What I really like about using watercolor with alcohol marker, and I have other tutorials where I talk about watercolor with alcohol marker, so I'll make sure to link those for you guys, is that it kind of retains the best properties of both media, and then you end up with something that's way better than you would necessarily get with either. I do a lot of floral illustrations where, because I want these really vibrant, saturated, almost neon colors, I'll do the majority of the local color using alcohol marker. And then when I want to start building up depth, if I want to add some cooler shadows, that's when I switch over to watercolor and I can use like the phthalo blues to paint some of the bluer shadows into the foliage. Okay, so now I want to add some definition to these illustrations. So for that, I'm kind of breaking the lineless style. If you get tighter, more rendered, more detailed, you can still keep it lineless. You're going to have enough definition and contrast. But since both of these are kind of lighter pieces, I'm inking with a brush pen. I believe this is a Tombow Furenosuke. No, can't be a Furenosuke. It's a Tombow. Let me actually pull it out of my drawer. Let's see. What are you? It's a Kuretake something. I'm so sorry. Unfortunately, it has a lot of Japanese on it, and I cannot quite tell what it is. However, you can also use these Tombow colored brush pens, and these are actually alcohol marker safe, but I love using them after I've already colored it because it means my line art is a lot lighter than it would have been if I inked it first. And they're available in like 8 different colors, from yellow and orange to pink to purple to brown to black. They sell them even at Plaza, so they're fairly easy to find, but if you guys can't find them, I'll pop a link in the description to where you can get them over on Amazon. They have a teeny tiny little brush tip, but they're really easy to use, and I love using brush pens because you can get various line weights when you ink, which makes your pieces so much more lively than if you just inked with a technical pen. So I highly recommend, if you've never tried inking with a brush pen, give it a try. Borrow one, order one online. I am sure you can find somebody who has one that you can play with. And a lot of art supply stores do have them in store. You just have to ask. And using different colors also adds some color to the piece. I know that sounds redundant, but if we were just inking with black, it would not be adding any color, but it would be adding contrast, which would make everything feel a little bit heavier. By using colored line arts, we're kind of adding further detail and we're adding further nuance. Finally, I want to use some white for some highlights, and I'm using Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White here. A while back, I tested a bunch of different whiteout correctional products from Japan. I kind of put them head to head. I did a bunch of tests with them. I'll put the video down in the description for you guys. And my favorite for corrections and reworking was Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. Now, that's just my favorite. You are welcome to put it to the test and figure out what you like. And I'm sure other artists have their own preferences, but that's my recommendation. So I highly recommend you check those sets out and see for yourself. Nice thing about Bleed Proof White is you can go back over it with alcohol marker once it's fully dry. It is going to be a little bit lighter than your original application, so I don't like putting in corrections with alcohol marker. I don't like correcting my stuff until after it's completely done. Okay, so I wanted to do a little bit more with these busts, so I went ahead and I cut them out just using a plain old pair of scissors. We're going to do a little bit of a cut paper mixed media thing here just to add some interest and to make these a little bit more interesting. This is a great way to reuse sketches that you really like. You're not quite ready to let them go to the sands of time. It's really simple. I just have various scraps of paper that I kind of hoard like a dragon. I just sleep on them at night. And I'm using the Tombow adhesive roller. It's the non-removable one. And what's cool about this over glue is, you guys know glue, even glue sticks, have kind of a tendency to make your paper buckle because they add a little bit of moisture. This does not do that. I also have a tape stamper. I don't like it nearly as much as the tape rollers. The tape rollers are really, really easy to use. You can find them almost anywhere. I know Michael's has them and I know Amazon has them. Now we're just going to use some cherry blossom punch outs. I bought a cherry blossom punch on Amazon and I cut some shapes out from some of my favorite papers. I also have these really cute little Chiyogami kind of doodles. It came from a Zen Pop box and I really like them, so I'm just using that to add some extra accents. Alright, so that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye!